Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 6th, 2019. Ground of Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, I thought I was getting ready for the Olympics down here today. I didn't know whether I was playing badminton or tennis or swinging a baseball bat. We had an invasion of flies running around here today, and all I could do was swing at everything.
Yeah, sometimes flies love things that are sweet. But I know you talked about butter. I think butter is good for flies. It makes them stick. It makes their wings stick together. They don't fly as high, Big C. But it's all fair in love and war. A lot of good things happen in the sports. And people are always talking about, no matter what sports it happens to be, will a certain player sign? Will a certain player hold out? We have no idea. That's the talk with Ezekiel Elliott. Also, there's a lot of baseball going on. And if you haven't noticed, a lot of people are still hitting home runs, even though they say the ball is not juiced. I do want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So, Big C, I know you said flies. I know in California people swat flies, but would you believe in some countries they actually eat flies? It's like sprinkles on dessert, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about the protein that comes from a lot of insects, Charlton, a lot of third world countries look at various insects as delicacies, whether it's ants, whether it's crickets, whether it's larvae. So many countries other than the U.S. go out and look at the nutritional value of an insect. I mean, everything we basically consume comes from the earth, Charlton, whether it's an animal, whether it's a plant. So it's just depending on the stage that you consume it in.
Yeah, that's very true. So all fair in love and war. Some people eat everything. I remember watching some programs on CNN, and it was Mr. Bourdain, the late Matthew Bourdain. He would go around the world, and they would show what people eat. Now, as an African-American, I have many different friends. But some people believe that it's anathema to eat chitlins. Now, I don't eat chitlins, but I got some cousins. They eat chitlins like it's the last meal they ever have, Big C. Do you understand that, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, there's certain intestinal organs, Charlton, I'm not going to run across my lips. I'm not that desperate for a meal. You know, I guess they would say I would be one of those guys that was fasting at that point when it came down. Just pass me a cold glass of water and I'll get full off of that.
Yeah, I like collard greens. Collard greens are good enough for me. Sometimes people put meat in them, and that's all fair in love and war. It's all good. I do want to say today's it's a wonderful day, and sometimes, again, thoughts and prayers with all the victims all over the country, whether it's El Paso, Texas, or Canton, Ohio, or many other places. But it's about fighting for what you want. And in this country, in fact, anywhere in the universe, you got to fight for what you want. You got to always fight for something. Some people fight for health. Some people are fighting for the chance to win a game. Some people are just fighting for the right to be elected. But I do want to say a special thanks to a good friend of mine who is also, I want to send out some thoughts and prayers. And her name is Joy Green. I've known her for many years. She actually came on our program when we first started back in the day, Big C. And she does work with some sports programs down in Southern California, TMZ. And I told her I'd give a shout out to her. I just want to say be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And just keep praying up, and everything's going to turn out fine. Big C, I know that so many things happen in life, and people need help. But have you ever had a friend reach out to you and say, can you keep me in your thoughts and prayers, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I think we've all had that, friends and family members that have asked that question of everybody. You know, I've had that as well as anybody else. I mean, we always keep various people in our thoughts and prayers every day, Charlton. That's just part of humanity.
Yes.
At least you know who these people are and where they are, Charlton. You always, you know, wish them the best of health and the best of safety. You know, that's just human compassion that we all should have in our lives.
Yeah, we all have that. And just keep fighting. You got to believe, you got to believe, you got to believe that everything you want is yours. I also want to say to people, if you're reaching out for anything, I'm still out on vacation doing some traveling, but there's a national hotline number for people who need help. And sometimes you don't have a friend that can reach out and say, can you pray for me? But you can call and get help. You can call 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. I know a lot of teenagers. Sometimes they get bullied. Big C, I remember you told the story just yesterday, how you were shy. I never would have known you were shy because you always talk a lot, and I love that about you. But I had no idea you were shy. But some teenagers, they're also shy. And when they need help, they don't pick up the phone and call, but they will text. If you have any type of drama going on in your life, you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. And you can get some help, but you got to reach out and ask for it, Big C. So I want to just thank you, Big C, for telling me about that hotline, and people can use it. Would you believe today is a beautiful day? It is August the 6th, 2019. On this date, August 6th, in 1890, talk about fighting. Cy Young gets his first Major League win. That streak would continue to amass a total of 511. Big C, he had to fight every time he was on the mound. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, every time he was on the mound, Charlton, when they talk about baseball pitching greatness today, it's always measured against Cy Young. As a matter of fact, the National League and American League winners will get the Cy Young Award, which is so properly named after this great pitcher, Charlton.
Yeah.
And you think about amassing 511 wins over a career.
Yeah.
This is a career, Charlton, when they did not have bullpen relief, when a pitcher had to go to 9 innings to 12 innings to get a victory. And Cy Young was always there when he was called on to help his team back in those eras, Charlton.
Yep.
So when we think about baseball players now, and you hope to get your pitcher into the 5th or the 6th inning, for them to get credit for that start and that win, Charlton. Baseball players are not built the way that they used to be, Charlton. And we can always talk about the greatness of athletes now and the numbers that they're putting up. But numbers that were set years ago will never be eclipsed, such as the numbers that Cy Young amassed during his great baseball career.
And you know, I know you've played baseball at some time in your life, and I hear some of the great players talking today, and anytime we talk about baseball, and we talk about fighting, my great friend Joey Green. You keep fighting. It's already won. You've already won. And I think of Curt Flood. I still think about Curt Flood because not too many people know who he is, Big C. And not knowing who Curt Flood is a lot like not knowing the person that puts the meal on your table. Could you imagine? You go out and work hard all day. You bring home some food. You put it on the table. And people eat without saying thank you. Well, a lot of people make a lot of money today. And Curt Flood's the reason, but they still don't say thank you, Big C, on Curt Flood. Your thoughts?
Well, Curt Flood played in a time when baseball players were owned by franchises, Charlton. You didn't have the freedom and the autonomy to move about at your own free will. They could control salaries. They kept players in check. And if they didn't want you in baseball, they just pull a Colin Kaepernick on you and ban you from the league.
That's true.
So Curt Flood did a great deed for all professional athletes, Charlton, opening up that loophole called free agency to give the players the opportunity to move about at their own will and play in the city that they decide to play in, and also, Charlton, to also expand upon the money that they were being able to make throughout their career.
Yeah, and I just think it's amazing. I hear some people giving interviews, and they talk about someone who set a record for breaking the record, breaking the bank with a contract, and the guy, Curt Flood, name never gets mentioned. Think about that the next time someone cooks your dinner, they bring the food home, and you don't even thank them for the meal. I think I always want to give homage to Curt Flood. 66 years ago, the great Ted Williams, he returned to the Boston Red Sox lineup after serving, believe how great this man was, the Korean War, where he had just crash-landed his jet after being hit by enemy aircraft fire. And on a combat mission, he would go on to hit 407 through 37 games. We talk about how greatness is. But when you fought in a war and you come back to play a baseball game, we talked about fighting for what you want, Big C. That's what you really call fighting, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, here it is in today's era, Charlton. We got players fighting in free agency. Every now and then they fight on the mound.
Yeah.
Here is Ted Williams, who went out and put his life on the line for this great country of America during the Korean War.
Yeah.
Took on enemy gunfire, Charlton, and was shot down and crash-landed. But he was prescient enough to come back home, Charlton, after serving his time. He wasn't a draft dodger like the president. He volunteered for the Korean War. Ted Williams actually served in World War II also.
Yeah.
He served in 2 great American wars, Charlton. He's a true war hero. He didn't say he had shin splints. He didn't ask for a deferment because he was playing professional baseball.
Right.
He said, it's my duty to go serve this country. and he went and served it for a second time, Charles. You think about 2 tours of duty in 2 separate wars. Ted Williams did that.
Yeah.
But he also had a great spirit about him. You think about that, to go out and defend the honor of your country, and then to come back and be able to represent your teammates, not only represent them, Charlton, but lead them via example. Here's a guy who batted over 400.
Wow.
After coming back, not being in baseball, Charlton, for the majority of the season, being across the world fighting in a world war, going on over in Korea. Coming back, being salient and prescient enough to bat over 400, Charlton, through that 37 games.
That's amazing.
That meant that 4 out of every 10 baseballs he saw, Charlton, made it through the infield safely for him to get on base.
Yeah, they got through safely. It's ironic, just in doing some travels, and my father was an Air Force man, and I saw the SR-71, and I remember him telling me about it. I said, Dad, how fast did it fly? And he said, well, I can't tell you that, but I know it can get from New York to L.A. in about 2 hours. So my math says about 3,000 miles per hour. He didn't say how fast it went. He just said in about that time. But when you have men who fight for this country, I'm sure when they hear that they're fighting for an all-star lineup or fighting for a Hall of Fame recognition, that really falls on deaf ears to them. But congratulations. Just to appreciate what great people have done, Big C. Also, one of the most iconic franchises in the universe, the New York Yankees, they said, think about it. They set a park home run record last night in Baltimore. They hit 5 home runs at Camden Yards, which is a great stadium, including 2 by Mike Troutman, to set a major league record. And when he hit his 13th straight game in Baltimore to a 9-6 victory, overshadowing the Orioles second baseman Jonathan Villar, who hit for the cycle. There's always great games being played at Camden Yards, but because the Orioles have been struggling lately, people maybe look above it. But for the Yankees to do what they've done, it's like they do it every year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they seem to be doing it every night as we look at the scoreboard for Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
But you can't overshadow what Villar did. Even though the Yankees broke a record in Camden Yards by a team hitting opposing team hitting home runs there in a season.
Yeah.
Villar hitting for the cycle, one of the most rarest feats in all of Major League Baseball. And here's the Yankees overshadowing that and destroying, the Baltimore Orioles. This has just been anathema of the Baltimore Orioles season.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they do good, somebody else is always doing something better that they're playing.
Yeah, it is. And I look at so many ballparks, and I just love the configuration of the ballparks. It's always great when the ballparks are full, but it's even greater when you have great athletes setting records, and the Yankees, they have a litany of records that they've set over the years. I still say, when you look at great players, you look at Christian Yelich. He hit 2 home runs and took over the Major League lead with 39. He powered the Milwaukee Brewers to a 9-7 victory over the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, I know we talk about small markets, Big C, and Yelich obviously in contention for Player of the Year. Seems to be that way all the time. I just appreciate how dominant he can be, even in a small market. If he were in New York, it'd be on TV more than it is now, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a guy that Derek Jeter said he could not play down in Miami, and he got rid of as well as Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
But Christian Yelich has thrived up in Milwaukee. I guess it must be something in the field
flies.
of the Bronx up there for him. Charlton,
Yeah.
He led the major leagues in home runs last year in capturing the National League MVP, and he's on pace to be a repeat MVP in the National League. And with that 39 home runs already on the season, Charlton, seems like he's going to be a runaway winner without competition.
Now, give me your thoughts on Yelich. He's not a big, fit guy like Barry Bonds back in the day, like Mark McGwire back in the days. He's not built like Sammy Sosa when he was doing his thing. He's not built like a Cecil Fielder. He's not built like some of the guys who just smashed home runs at, it seems like, almost every other bat. He has the body more like a Hank Aaron. These guys are not very big, but they hit with strategy. Give me your thoughts on why he's leading the league, and he's not the biggest guy in the league, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, he would remind you more of a Ted Williams that we just talked about when you look at stature of a Christian Yelich.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who is a student and a mechanic of the game, Charlton. It's not always about how big and bulky you are. It's about club head speed, Charlton, when you're bringing that bat around. Here's a guy with great eye-hand coordination, and that's Christian Yelich.
Yeah.
Because you got to be able to put that ball on the sweet spot of the bat, and that's what he's been doing consistently in the major leagues for the past 2 years. You think about it. He hit 47 home runs last year to lead the major leagues, and now he's at 39, and we still have 2 months to go in the season, Charlton, so he could easily eclipse that number that he set last year. But it comes down to mechanics, Charlton. He's a workman. He's a student of the game, and that's what's making him so great.
And with that being the case, now I'm going to be a little bit cynical here. I told you I grew up watching Barry Bonds. I grew up watching guys like Reggie Jackson, and of course the Bass brothers with McGwire and Canseco. And when a big man can smash the ball and lead the league in home runs, there's always some talk. Even Sammy Sosa, he was on a TV program just last week, and they were saying, Sammy, tell me the truth, Sammy. Did you take anything? And Sammy said no. And he kept asking the question. Sammy said, look, my friend, this interview's over. Why don't small guys ever get questioned when they hit the ball farther than the big guys? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's been many small players over the eras, Charlton, that have been able to launch the ball out of the park. You know, but they don't get questioned. You look at guys who have bulked up. I mean, Major League Baseball players have bulked up over the last 3 decades. If you look at them, they've gotten larger and larger. But, you know, I remember George Foster when he played center field for the Cincinnati Reds, and he hit 50 home runs back in the 70s. Nobody questioned him. Mickey Mantle hit 51 home runs with the Yankees. Babe Ruth had 61. No one said anything about that. So there have been players that have transcended in every era, that have hit a copious amount of home runs during the season, and people haven't questioned. I think the question of players have come with the social media era also. When we look at this social media era and everybody has access to things. Back when newsprint ruled the table in Major League Baseball, you had to wait a day or two to get the story on somebody. Now that we have instant 24-hour media cycles, Charlton, everybody is always trying to fill it with a story. So whether the story has legs or not, you can always put it out there. Let somebody dispel it later on.
Later on. And a lot like my friend Joey Green that works at TMZ, you'll see a lot of her reports on television for the news program, sports program out of Southern California. In travels, Big C, you know what I'm seeing less and less of? I'm seeing less and less of newspapers. Now, you go back to the days of guys like Hank Aaron, even especially Babe Ruth, and they hit some of the most, furthest home runs in the history of baseball. And they were never accused of anything, but I second that. Babe Ruth was always doing something that would make his blood burn a little bit brighter, like a lot of the good old boys do down south. Does that make any sense, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, players have always been on some type of substance. It used to be back in the old days where they called them greenies and stuff. They actually took speed, LSD. A lot of players did. They were always hyped up to play the game because you played a lot of double hitters back in those eras because you didn't have the lights in stadiums. So you had to play a lot of back-to-back games at certain times of the year. So you had to have something to keep you juiced up, literally.
No pun intended. It gets, that's why they're so good at swatting flies, but they got extra juice when they get up, Big C. Another great hitter. And I love it when the slim guys can hit and go yard like the big guys that were all bulked up from whatever they were putting in their system. And I'm not accusing any guy of anything. I like when the guys are accused of being clean. But you can be skinny and dirty, they'll call you clean. You can be big and clean, they'll call you dirty. Talk about an oxymoron. Corey Bellinger. You think about Cody Bellinger for the Dodgers. A 3-hit home run. And rookie Tony Gonsolin pitched a stellar 6 innings to earn his first win for the LA Dodgers in an 8-0 rout of the Cardinals. Now, we talked about yesterday, no matter where you go in the baseball universe, when you see the Dodgers and you see the Cardinals, their uniforms are synonymous with baseball. They're not like many teams that will change and they'll have 7 different uniforms over the course of a decade. They tend to stay the same. What's happened to the Cardinals that they can get blown out and even blanked by the Dodgers, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you get teams out on these long road trips, and it's these hot summer months. And when you've been on the road, you become road weary. You're sleeping in different beds all the time. Your meal routine is different. You're missing your family, and you just want to get home. So a lot of times players just don't have it in them. And then you also got to look, they're going to play a lot of different players in the lineup. So you don't always have your normal starting 8 out there, Charlton. So when you get some utility players in the lineup, Charlton, and they're just not hitting, these type of games are going to occur.
Well, again, another thought, because I'm going to ask you this, again, because I was watching this thing on Sammy Sosa. And Sammy Sosa was just, I felt uncomfortable for him. Number one, they talked about his skin color. Now, I know many white Americans that will suntan so much that they even get skin cancer. No one ever accuses a white person of not wanting to be white, even though many suntan so they can get darker. We know the dominant gene came from Africa. But Sammy Sosa, irrespective of what he did, I want to know why many mainstream reporters will say to a person of color that skin becomes lighter, are you trying to deny your background? Are you trying to deny your ethnicity? If you look at a Caucasian person in the wintertime and the summertime, they can be different shades. And in fact, some look darker than what they call black Americans. But they're never questioned about not liking their ethnic background. Does that make any sense, your thoughts?
Well, I also got a question. Why would Sammy Sosa want to put himself up there on that stage to be asked any question?
Yeah.
Whether he took anything of substance while he was playing as a baseball player, or what he's doing to his skin, melatonin, Charlton.
Yeah.
As a person, when you put yourself up in the vulnerability of questions, then you're going to be subjected to have to answer some of those.
Yeah.
But what are you seeking? Since you're retired from the game and you have nothing to prove to anybody or nothing to hide, why do you need to go out there in the public spotlight and to command an interview?
That's
Sammy
very good.
Sosa puts himself in that position.
Yeah.
No one in the baseball world today is thinking about Sammy Sosa. The media outlet needed a story. Sammy Sosa needed to be noticed. So both of those things came together, and if Sammy's disenchanted by the end outcome of that,
yeah,
then Sammy is just like somebody buying a junk used car. Let the buyer beware, because all the answers that you get may not be the ones that you want to know.
And let me ask you, and I think you have a perspective that Sammy will never have, because you worked as an athlete and then you transitioned to the media. So you saw the questions as an athlete that Sammy faced. But you can probably go where Sammy didn't go. Now, as an athlete, you met reporters that you became their brethren when you got in the broadcast booth. I want to get only you can answer this question, Big C. When you got into that position that many players were in, where they were being asked the questions, when you became the broadcaster, did you look at athletes differently? Are there things that you just did not go there to try to embarrass a guy the way reporters do today, because they never played? They've only been a reporter. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, in talking to athletes, Charlton, I never tried to betray the trust of having a one-on-one interview. Or if I'd spoken something in private with that athlete, they stayed in anonymity. I never disclosed the source.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to be able to keep that pipeline of inside information. Now, when I was in the broadcast booth, I would call an athlete out if he was not performing, regardless of who he was.
Yeah.
That's what your job is. I wasn't there to coddle them because they said, well, his name is sacred. You shouldn't say anything negative about it.
Right.
You should blast his teammate. No, if the teammate is performing and getting the job done and you're not delivering the product to the teammate, then I got to call it on you.
Yes.
You're a professional. You're getting paid. You should not be in that position.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to betray the trust in an interview, and I interviewed many athletes, Charlton, during my time in the broadcast arena. But those were friendly interviews.
Yeah.
I was not out there trying to make a name by myself by undermining that athlete. And if you look at majority of these interviews that are done with athletes or former athletes, they're not done by former athletes. They're done by just a person who wants to be a broadcaster.
That's a very good point. And so I think Sammy Sosa can understand, and a lot of other athletes can understand what you just said. It's not always nice to be nice to someone just because they have a microphone in their hand. I want to say, back to baseball, Miguel Sano pitched a 2-hit home run in the 9th inning to give Minnesota Twins a 5-3 victory over the Atlanta Braves, which I think the Braves are just right there to make that next leap, that quantum leap, but every now and then they'll drop a game they should win. The Braves have lost back-to-back games, giving up 2 game-winning home runs. What's going on in Atlanta? Is it too hot and humid, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, the ball carries in the heat. And you think about just 2 nights ago, Raul Acuna Jr. hit a 3-run jack to tie up the game for the Braves, but they lost it in the 10th. And then last night, Charlton, they lost again in the 9th, giving up a 2-run jack to the Minnesota Twins. So that bullpen for the Braves right now has to be a little bit worrisome for them. I don't think they did anything to improve their bullpen at the trade deadline. Everybody's always talking about you need pitching for a playoff run. It's not hitting, but hitting has been destroying pitching, as we've seen lately here in these hot months in baseball.
Yeah, the hitters. I heard Justin Verlander in an interview, and he talked about having a 2-seam and then changing. I don't know why he did it on television, but he talked about eliminating one pitch and how he held the ball that made him more devastating on the plate. Now, maybe he was just giving smoke signals, Big C, but he's going to be a Hall of Famer. If the world works the way it should, Verlander's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But he's also, and maybe it's snake oil, but he's telling how he became a dominant pitcher by telling the whole universe where he holds the ball with his two fingers, Big C. And I want to get your thoughts. If you're an athlete, if you're listening to that, is it something you pay attention to? Because you have these batters and you have the pitchers, when they talk to the catcher, they'll cover their mouths with a glove. So why was he coming on television saying what he does to strike people out, Big C, if that makes any sense, your thoughts?
Well, I look at that just the way I would look at a boxer. A boxer is going to tell you, I'm going to punch you with my right hand just based on his stance.
Yeah.
And so you know it's coming, but you can't defend it.
You got to stop it.
He'll tell you I'm throwing a left hook, but
right.
you can't defend it. When you're a pitcher on the mound in baseball, everyone knows what your repertoire is. You basically have 4 pitches that you're going to come with.
Yeah.
You got your splitter, you got your sinker, you got your fastball, you got your curve. That's what you're coming with.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody in baseball understands the delivery point of a pitch when you're standing at the plate.
Yeah.
It's about the break on the ball. I mean, you see it coming out of his hand. You can't pick up the rotation on the ball, Charlton. You're just hoping to be able to make contact when he gets to the plate. That's the reason why the nastiness of the pitchers in modern baseball exists. The pitchers don't get tired anymore because they hope to go 5 or 6 innings. They're not out there pitching 8 and 9 innings every outing, Charlton.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I guess I think I've heard it many, many times that if you can back it up, then it's not bragging. So maybe he's so confident he's going to tell you what he's going to do, and he's going to do it anyway. Javier Baez hit 2 of the Chicago Cubs' 4 home runs, and the Cubs bullpen barely held off the Oakland A's in a 6-5 win. I know the A's are right there. They're probably the best team in the American League that will make a wild card game. And if they were not in the same league with the Houston Astros, they might even win that division, Big C. But the Cubs got them last night. Your thoughts?
Well, this comes down to what you said, with Javier Baez hitting the 2 of the 4 home runs. Giving up the long ball late in the season is that your pitching arms have gotten a little tired in these hot months of the summer. And that's why teams are making drastic trades during the trade deadline to bring in pitchers from opposing teams, Charlton, to shore up their starting rotation and their bullpen.
Yeah.
This has been evident when we saw the Baltimore Orioles giving up 5 home runs to the Yankees, and then we see the Oakland A's giving up 4 home runs to the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, it's amazing when you look at the city of Oakland and you look at the city of Chicago. I can say both cities are similar. The Bay Area, Oakland's in the number 4 media market, and then Chicago is in the number 3 media market, give or take whatever polls you listen to. But you have a contrast in baseball style. In Oakland, which used to be the mecca of baseball, and that's when they were winning World Series back in the 70s. And the last time they had the chance to beat the Dodgers in '88. But that was a time before they put up Mount Davis. You could barely get a seat at the Coliseum for many of the A's games. Now their team is good again, but I'm surprised if you ever find more than 30,000 fans in the stadium that holds about 50,000 for baseball, but they tarped it off so 35 is maximum. But even with that, you still see a lot of empty seats. I contrast that to the Cubs Stadium. If you look at Wrigley Field, they've added to the outfield, but there's no talk of needing to tear it down to build a new stadium so that people will come. In Oakland, it's all about tear down the old stadium where we've won 3 championships, and let's build a new stadium so that people will come. They're both the communities that have just been there for a long time. Why the contrast in Oakland's thinking that we got to tear down what we have to build something new? And Wrigley, they don't do that. They want the history to remain for the next 100 years, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at a couple of iconic cities, and you look at Boston and you look at Chicago, these old heritage ballparks, Charlton, and where they're located at, I think a lot to do with cities and talking about putting in new arenas is about land mass availability.
Yeah.
Can you put that new arena in an area of land, Charlton, where you're not going to displace prominent people?
Yeah.
When they put in new stadiums, Charlton, in cities, it's about displacing people of lower income. It's about gentrification.
Yep.
About going in, reclaiming that land, being able to put other amenities around that arena where other people can make money, where you've priced out the low-income people that were living there.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking at when you look at Oakland. If they move that stadium into another area, they're looking at outsourcing the people that were there that were lower income in that area, looking at placing them in other parts of the city so that people can come in and use up the land around that new arena.
Yeah.
That's what you have in Chicago and that's what you have in Boston. You don't have the land mass where you can go put a new arena, Charlton, and displace people.
Yeah.
So you keep what's there in those friendly confines of those two great ballparks, but it's also a heritage. It's a family heirloom that these people look at that's been passed down over generations. And it means something to those people of those eras. So they will fight and put up petitions that we don't want a new ballpark.
Yeah.
We're happy with what we have. But it comes down to the citizens, Charlton. Do you patronize the place that's there, or do you want to have new digs so you can patronize it for 2 years and stop patronizing it also?
Well, you always know money talks, and when people want something new, they might like it for the first year or two, and then they miss the old confines. I want to say I so much appreciate having access to the airwaves, and what we're going to do is come up on the Big C Pause. And today we've been talking about fighting. And there's something about fighting where there's individual, people got to fight for what they want. You got to fight for your role in this world. You got to fight for something. It doesn't mean physically fight, but you got to want something bad enough that you go after it. And I just want to say to my friend Joey Green, keep fighting. Everybody fights. If you want it, just claim it as yours. I want to say we're going to take this Big C Pause. We'll come right back and talk about some boxing, talk about fighters, and we hope that you'll come back with us. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back on the Big C Sports Show after what's called the Big C Pause. And I want to thank so many people for helping with Big C Sports, primarily Big C, and just, talking to you about how we started this thing. Would you believe that Big C said he was shy? I never heard that before, but he said he was shy. And now he's going to do so many great things, winning awards for broadcast as well as an athlete. Really appreciate working with you. And you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, on the iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big Sports on Spreaker. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. If you have a television set in your home, and most people do, as long as you pay the bill, you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast Television. What I really like, though, is the app called Alexa. You say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the growth with Big C Sports. Everything starts with a seed. Keep planting seeds and keep believing. Talk about a guy who fought. Maybe the best fighter in the universe, the late Muhammad Ali. Not only was, in my mind, is he the #1 fighter out there, and I mean, it's like he's still here because his spirit was so big. But you think of some of the other great fighters of all time. We close our show, ironically, with a tribute to Drew Boudini Brown. He was the guru. He was a mantra guy for Muhammad Ali. And when he talked about motivating, Muhammad Ali motivated himself so much, oftentimes the guys he fought were afraid. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you go in, fighting is a sight game, Charlton. You have to get in your opponent's mind. You have to get him off kilter. You don't want him walking in there confident. Ali was a master of that in pre-fight preparation through press conferences. Everyone wanted to talk to him. He grew up in an era where boxers were basically silent.
Yeah.
Where a reporter controlled the interview. He would ask a question where he would only get a simple answer. Ali would expand upon that all the time. He would take control of the microphone. I remember many reporters said, wait, I'm doing the talking. He said, no, you're listening to me.
You're listening, yeah.
Ali was a man that was a revolutionary in many ways, not just for boxers, but for all professional athletes. When you listen to the oratory of many professional athletes, and mainly minority athletes today, they're resonating what Muhammad Ali had done back in the 60s. And opening up the airways saying, be proud of who you are. Be dominant of what you possess. And you control this guy with the mic. Don't let him control you.
Well, that's always true. And I wanted to just lead in with Muhammad Ali before we run down tonight's Major League Baseball schedule, because it's about fighting. And everybody right now is fighting for something. A lot of people are fighting for a position to get into the playoffs, to finish up the regular season really strong. Tonight's Major League Baseball lineup, a lot of games are already underway. Milwaukee at Pittsburgh. You have the New York Yankees at Baltimore. Chicago White Sox, they're playing at Detroit. Kansas City's at Boston. And we talked about stadiums. I would hope that they would never tear down Fenway Park. Big C, just the environment of Boston for baseball, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the only way that place would come down and that would be condemned. And if you think about what they did in Boston over the last decade or so, they've constantly expanded that stadium. They elevated the press box. They added seats out in left field. They raised the height of those, Charlton. But that's a stadium that's going to be around. It's Boston strong, Charlton. It's part of the iconic makeup of that city. Everything else in Boston has been rebuilt. Boston Garden is gone. You think about Foxborough Stadium, it's gone. And so Gillette Stadium replaced it, as well as TD Garden replaced the Boston Garden.
Yeah.
But the Fenway Park in Boston is one of the last great bastions in baseball.
Yeah.
It's an iconic structure.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to move beyond it because it is what Boston stands for.
Boston strong, Big C. The Miami, they're at the New York Mets. Texas, they're at Cleveland. And you have Toronto at Tampa Bay. I think the ugliest, we should do a poll. What's Big C's choice for the ugliest Major League Baseball stadium? It would have to be the Tampa Bay Devil. I just don't understand how you're in the Sunshine State and everybody has a dome on top of them. L.A. Angels at Cincinnati, Oakland A's at Chicago. Just talked about another great stadium in Wrigley Field in Chicago. I remember the great Harry Carey and how he would come and take me out to the ball games. I have a friend, Jim Kucerik, who runs Sports Pro Hero, who lives in Chicago about a mile from the stadium, and he loves the atmosphere around the stadium. You have Colorado at Houston. Again, Verlander, I want to make sure I heard you right. He's such a good pitcher that he can come on television and talk about how he changed his pitches and people still can't hit him, Big C. You agree with what he was doing? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I respect an individual like that because as an athlete, everybody's throwing the same pitches in baseball.
Yeah.
And it's for a batter to try to figure it out. Unless you tell a guy what's coming. And there was a movie that was done called Major League.
That's right. Charlie Sheen.
He's coming with a fastball.
Yeah.
He jacks it out of the stadium.
Yeah.
But, that's the only way that a batter is going to get on top of a pitcher. I mean, most of the pitches that they throw, Charlton, are so nasty now. And they come from the same angle that you really can't pick up. You see splitters looking like fastball.
Yep.
All of a sudden, the bottom drops out of it.
Yeah.
So what Justin Verlander is doing, he's been successful with it for years. You can tell anybody what's coming, but can they get the bat on it?
Can they get the bat on it? Atlanta at Minnesota, Philadelphia at Arizona, Washington at San Francisco, and they have Mendez going against Sanchez. Now, the Giants have been struggling since they kept Madison Bumgarner. I know they were chasing and looking for a spot. I would still hope to see the Giants get into the playoffs, at least the wild card under Bochy's final season at the helm. I don't know if it's going to happen because it's almost like when you get comfortable, the whole team kind of exhaled. Would that make any sense, or do you think it's just the law of averages, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, this team was on a heater, Charlton, when you think about what they did in the month of July.
Yeah.
Once the trade deadline came and gone, I think everybody kind of relaxed a bit, but players are playing for, their position on the team.
Yeah.
And so you're playing not to be moved, and that's what the Giants are doing, but seem like they've relaxed just a little bit. Maybe it's just a short slump. Hopefully they can pick it back up, but they're going to have to get kick-started soon, Charlton, because they're playing a lot of divisional games, and every time you lose one within the division, you moved an extra game back.
I agree. Tonight, St. Louis at the Dodgers. You have Nicholas versus Kershaw. I think Kershaw is going to have a renaissance playoff run because he's not the ace anymore on that team. San Diego at Seattle and a matchup game Chicago at Detroit. Would you agree that Kershaw, now that he's no longer Kenyon Rue's the best pitcher for the Dodgers, and people know that. But do you think that buys Kershaw some more time to not be so stressed out, if that makes any sense? Your thoughts?
Well, I think from a Kershaw perspective, as you get latter part of your career, is that if you get an extra game to sit back and see what the opposing batters are doing, it's more advantageous for you.
Yeah.
Because you have such knowledge of the game. And I think that helps him not to have to go out in game one of a playoff series, that he gets a chance to sit back and study the batters and see what they struggle with, and it would help him in his next outing.
Well, I agree with that. And I just want to see the Dodgers get into the World Series again. I know, being a Northern California guy, people go, what are you talking about, the Dodgers? I've always admired Dodger Blue, and I love the Giants too. And we talked about fighting again. Joey Green works for TMZ Sports down in Southern California, and I told you I'd put a little shout out for you. Just keep claiming it's yours. Whatever you want is yours, and God's got your back. When it talks about fighting, and I know we talked about Ali. I know we close our shows with the great Jew Bendini Brown. Marvin Hagler, I'll never forget, he was one of the first fighters, Big C, that really championed the shaved head. I know you shave your head. I shave mine also. But most fighters, like Ali, he didn't shave. Marvin Hagler came in, and he had a different look in the ring. A lot of African-Americans shave now. But give me your thoughts on Hagler. He was 62 wins, 3 losses. He was the world middleweight champion for 6.5 years, the second longest reign in the division history. And he did it as a bald head man, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about the greatness of a Marvin Hagler, Charlton, to go out and dominate a division for 6.5 years. That meant that you fought everybody who came along.
Yep.
And, he had an epic battle against Sugar Ray Leonard, but I think the most epic battle that he ever had was against Thomas Hearns, which is still one of the top 3 fights of all time when it's judged by all the boxing aficionados. This fight was a slugfest until the final, knockdown in that fight, Charlton.
Yeah.
But Marvin Hagler was gracious in the ring. He never had any scandal, any uproars, Charlton. He went out and he fought as a gentleman and a professional, and he was revered by all.
Well, when you think about the times that he fought, he reminds me of a bigger version of Floyd Money Mayweather. But he fought different because he would go after you. Mayweather mostly dances around, but he still reminds me of him, just a bigger version. Would that make any sense, Big C, or would you do not agree with that?
Well, I think of Marvin. Marvin was a boxer. When I look at Floyd Mayweather, he's a tactician.
Yeah.
He's not a boxer. He's trying to maneuver around you. So he was never willing to engage. Marvin walked forward. He never walked backwards.
Yeah. I miss those days of seeing that era of fighting when there was Hagler, there was Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran. So many great fighters that could all claim to being the best in what they were doing at that time. I want to go to another great fighter. And when you think about a Hagler's 62 wins and 3 losses, that's incredible fighting, Big C. Julio Cesar Chavez, 107 wins, 6 losses. Julio Cesar Chavez was an imposing boxer. He went on a streak of 87 consecutive wins to start his career, a remarkable feat. And I'm just telling you, anytime he can do anything over 50 is amazing. 87 wins consecutively to start his career, that feat is a record that is blemished after a controversial draw with Parnell Whitaker in 1993. And many people feel that all the great fighters, they still pale to the great Julio Cesar Chavez. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, everyone is always talking about records in boxing. Everyone talks about Rocky Marciano's 49 consecutive wins. Everyone talks about Floyd Mayweather being undefeated at 50 or 51 fights, whatever it is, depending on whether you count one of them or not.
Yeah.
But Julio Cesar Chavez, Charlton, set the table and the bar for every boxer to come along. 87 consecutive wins to start his career.
Amazing.
That's a feat that will never be beaten, Charlton. 87 consecutive professional fights.
Yep.
And it ended in a controversial battle, Charlton, a split decision, that he actually won the fight. But so as they talk about how great the fighters are, when you talk about Floyd Money Mayweather, you talk about Rocky Marciano.
Yeah.
Think about Julio Cesar Chavez. Think about the number 87.
Yeah.
Consecutive wins to start a pro career. A feat that will never be duplicated.
Never duplicated. And we again, today's theme is fighting. You got to fight for what you want. You got to fight for equality. Imagine how people of color, whether it's Julio Cesar Chavez, whether it's African Americans coming through slavery and Jim Crow and civil rights, everybody who's had to fight harder. You may not appreciate going through it, but it sure does make you stronger. I want to get into your mind and just ask you this question, Big C. When a person can win 87 in a row of anything, we think about Wooden's 88 wins for the UCLA Bruins back in the day, what does a fighter have to think about to stay? All the distractions that come at you when you become famous. Money, women, cars, good, everything. What was it about him that could live in that world but not be taken down by it, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Julio had the will to win, Charlton, to be the consummate professional athlete. He wasn't highly publicized. When you think about it, he was fighting in an era, Charlton, when Wide World of Sports was the gamut for the sports world.
Yeah.
That you saw sports basically on the weekend. His fight may have been spoken about in the paper, maybe every blue moon on the late nightly news.
Yeah.
The sports wrap-up part of it, Charlton. So he wasn't distracted in the world, in the profession that he played in, boxing.
Yeah.
He was the dominant force. And he fought every comer, Charlton. So when you look at all the professional athletes and even boxers today, they get more attention out of the ring because they don't spend any time in the ring.
Yeah. Well, let me go back to one more question I want to ask you, because I know Will Smith did a great role, I thought, when he played Ali. And what I was intrigued about with Ali is he was a bigger man out of the ring, even though he was a champion, won the championship, heavyweight championship 3 times in a row, talked about that. But he was a bigger figure out of the ring. And most people that think about Ali, they don't think about the time that he had great fights, where no matter he was fighting Frazier or Foreman or Liston, they think about him being a social activist, which is frowned upon by mainstream media when the activist is black. If it's Megan Rapinoe, a Caucasian woman, they say, hey, let's give her a parade. So Ali's a lot bigger than Julio. He's a lot bigger than anybody because of that. But if you could just give me your thoughts, and maybe it's hard to answer this question. I wonder what Ali and Julio Cesar Chavez would talk about if they sat down and had a cold one about why they're in the fight business in the first place. Big C, your thoughts. What would it be?
Well, Charlton, it was for the betterment of their lives during the time when they became professional athletes, Charlton. There were not many careers that minority athletes could achieve to in those times and be noticed around the world other than in a professional sport.
Yeah.
And these two men came from impoverished situations. Ali is an African-American in the U.S., Julio from South America.
Yeah.
But they were professions and tacticians about what they did. They were also both had social consciousness, Charlton, about the people and their surroundings that they were in.
Yep.
I think in the era that they grew up in, Charlton, to bring awareness to themselves and their people of their nationality is that they had to be outspoken.
Yeah.
And that's what Ali did. He had to be outspoken because of the way that he was treated after he had went and represented a country that said that they were proud of him.
Yep.
But when he came back to America, he couldn't even buy a hamburger in certain restaurants in Louisville, Kentucky.
Wow.
He was discriminated against.
Yeah.
He was accepted in other parts of the world, and he came back home and he was ostracized. And so he wanted his country, his home country, to know that they were treating black people wrong.
Yeah.
Because we were accepted as equals in other parts of this great world, but not equals in our own homeland.
I want to draw a quick contrast and juxtapose Julio Cesar Chavez, and you talked about his background, and Muhammad Ali, and you talked about his background, and look at the climate we have now in politics and how politics is a direct correlation to all the garbage coming out of the White House that has led to a lot of this white supremacy uprising. Now, people look at white supremacy, oh, it's just an isolated incident, the guy's crazy or whatever. But people of color, black and brown, have always had to fight. Have always had Native American brethren have to fight also. And the thing that some people don't like, Big C, is the pressure you have when you're down. It's the pressure you face when your back's against the wall. But as you talked about these two great men, if you don't lose focus, have faith in God, whatever it is. Like I'm telling my friend Joey Green, if you don't lose your hope, if you don't lose your faith, if you stay focused, how can they come from being faced with discrimination and xenophobia to become the best in the ring, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, because it was part of mainstream at that time, Charlton, and you know, segregation was prominent. You know, they grew up in that time, and to break that cycle, Charlton, they had to speak out.
Yeah.
It's things in society now become more accepted. They say, okay, that's just status quo, that's like it is. It's just like, you know, Senator Mitch McConnell will not denounce gun violence in America because it's status quo, because it's done by white males.
Yeah.
You're not going to denounce your own people. That's the reason why the Senate will not act on any gun laws in America, because they're denouncing their own people.
Yep.
We live in a country of almost 400 million people, and yet there's 450 million guns in America.
Wow.
For what? There's more guns in America in the streets than there are people. So that means that people don't have a chance to survive. We are eliminating our own race of people in America. We are eliminating Americans because our Senate will not act on gun reform. Don't sit there and say every time a white person shoots somebody, it's mental illness.
Right.
Because that's become the damn excuse.
Yeah.
Oh, there was mental illness. Then you want to blame it on a video game. Well, who creates the video game? White companies are putting the video games out for kids to buy, all right?
Yeah.
Not black American companies, Charlton. White companies are putting it out there. Whites are producing the guns and the ammunition. But the president, because he lacks empathy for those people who died, He said the people of Texas, he couldn't even mention El Paso because of all the immigrants they have in tents down in El Paso and they have in cages. So he didn't want to mention the city.
Yeah.
Not only that, when he got to Ohio, he could not even remember it was Dayton, and he said it was Toledo, Ohio.
Wow.
2 different cities.
Wow.
So when you have a president who doesn't have empathy for those Americans that die because they are minorities, they're not white. If these shooters had been Asian, if they had been Middle Eastern, if they had been Hispanic, if they had been black, it would have been an act of terrorism, called out right away on television and by law enforcement and our political leaders. They said it would have said it was terrorism.
Yeah.
But because there's been disgruntled white males going out shooting minorities, well, there has to be mental illness. There's always mental illness when it's white males shooting somebody.
Well,
even though you strategically plan this out, you travel 500 miles, you blog on the internet what you're going to do, and you're going to tell me that's a mental illness? Hell no, it's not.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
It's premeditated murder is what it is.
It's very premeditated. And just like fighting, we talked about, this show's about fighting today. Fighting makes freedom. You got to fight through something. And I just appreciate, I know people talk about sports and politics don't mix. Yeah, if you're dumb, it doesn't. But if you're smart, it does. And I appreciate Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon for just the way they handle media. I know everybody has their own choices and their own beliefs and whoever they want to watch, but I really appreciate people who can just tell it like it is, and they don't worry about is someone going to like what we say. Big C Sports is that way. I feel I rarely find any sports program that has linear. They have linear thinking. They're just going to do that until they tell them they're fired. But if you educate yourself, that has to be more you offer the universe other than who won the game. And I love that's what we do. Big C, Bernard Hopkins, 55 wins, 8 losses. Bernard Hopkins didn't learn boxing the traditional way. He was taught out of Gateford Prison while serving an 18-year sentence. Upon his release in 1988, Hopkins, he had a debut and soon became one of history's best pound-for-pound boxers. BC, he had to, obviously whatever he did or did not do as a person of color, oftentimes we're accused of things we did not do. I don't know. But I'm just saying he had to fight his way. He had to fight his way to get free again. He had to fight his way in the ring. He had to fight his way to keep doing things the right way. Big C, your thoughts on Hopkins?
Bernard Hopkins is the epitome of survival, Charlton, to serve an 18-year prison sentence and to be salient enough to come out mentally and physically and still keep fighting, Charlton, to grab your spot in society all over again. Where people had tossed him away as a piece of trash, Charlton, to come out and to be recognized around the world as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world.
Yeah.
That's mental fortitude and aptitude, Charlton, that he possessed. When you think about the heart of a lion, Bernard Hopkins had all that. He had the will not to give up.
Yeah.
And that's what the true heart of a boxer is.
Well, I think when we talk about him and how great boxing is and some of the great combatants that get into the ring, it is either win or get knocked out. And you got to appreciate people that do that. And some fighters, they go on to greater stardom after they're finished with their boxing life. I think of none other than the great George Foreman. 76 wins, 5 losses. George had one of the most distinguished careers in boxing. When Ali was exiled from the ring, Foreman destroyed Joe Frazier in 2 rounds. I'll never forget, I was a young boy watching that fight, and I thought they should have stopped it because I think he knocked him down about 6 times. But he gained the heavyweight title after losing to Ali and then getting outscored by Jimmy Young. Foreman quit and practically vanished from boxing. I think he had some type of spiritual awakening. But I tell you, my son loves to cook on his George Foreman grill, and I love eating the food. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, George Foreman was resurrected, Charlton. I mean, when he came out and beat up on Joe Frazier, no one had ever took a beating like that in the heavyweight ranks in modern time.
Yep.
6 knockdowns in 2 rounds, and everybody was crying for him to stop the fight even before they stopped it, Charlton, after the 6th knockdown. George Foreman was an imposing individual. He won the 1968 gold medal in the Mexico Olympics for the U.S., Charlton, and paralleled that into a great boxing career. But even after he disappeared from those fights from Ali and Jimmy Ellis, Charlton, he came back and recaptured the title as a new and reformed George Foreman. Yep. He changed his whole demeanor. He became more personal and personable. And the public accepted him as a new fighter, Charlton.
Yeah.
And he's gone on to great heights as a spokesperson.
I know there's one thing that I really appreciate about George Foreman. Before the Ali fight, I was in Hayward, California, and with my brothers, we had a chance to go see George Foreman, and he was sparring. And he asked one of my brothers to come get in the ring with him. And my brother, I think, was about 12 at the time, and he said, no, I'm not getting in the ring. And we teased my brother about that for many, many moons. But it was that moment that, you think about it, that moment that George Foreman called up my older brother to get into the ring with him and spar around. There must have been a couple hundred people in the gym. And my brother said no. And now here I am talking about George Foreman, that moment. How did I know that 40 some odd years ago that would have happened to be talked about today? That's one of the things I appreciate about the great George Foreman. Ezra Charles, 95 wins, 25 losses. Now, he was a true definition of a lion-hearted boxer, Big C. Dynamic, competitive, took out a bevy of Hall of Famers during his career. One of the most notable victories came when he unanimously outscored the great Joe Louis to keep his heavyweight title. Big C, your thoughts?
And you think about Ezra Charles, Charlton, this is a boxer who fought into his late 40s.
Yeah.
And he was a dominant heavyweight. You know, these are boxers who fought in the time that we did not have the multimedia. You know, you got them on the newsreel. You got a chance to listen to their fights on the radio. You did get a chance to see it on television. But Ezra Charles was an epitome, fighting in a time, Charlton, of Jim Crow and segregation. That majority of the fighters that he fought were white males.
Yeah.
And you're beating up on white males in a time when they would kill black men for even speaking back to a white man.
Yeah.
Ezra Charles was a true hero in America during that time.
Well, I just want to say that there's so much about the world of fighting, and I say to my friend, Joy Green with TMZ Sports, you got to keep fighting. Just claim it as already yours. Thoughts and prayers are with you, and everything's going to be fine. But I want to close out on one more thought on a great fighter that, to me, as a proud American, again, I respect especially black Americans, not because I'm black American. I respect white Americans too. I mean, I think one of the greatest Americans that we've ever had in this country is the late Billy Graham, a white man, bailed Dr. Martin Luther King out of jail for fighting for equality. But when I met this gentleman's son, and I actually interviewed him, and I was very impressed with him. Evander Holyfield, 40 wins in 10 losses. Holyfield had a list of accomplishments that can go on and on. For starters, he's the only person to be undisputed cruiserweight and also a heavyweight champion. As an amateur, Holyfield won the bronze medal for the United States Olympics team, and he's gone on to just be a statesman in boxing. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Evander Holyfield, as you said, had a very storied career, starting with the Olympics, Charlton. To be the undefeated cruiserweight champion of the world, unanimous, and also unanimous heavyweight champion of the world. And we know of those two controversial fights that he had with Mike Tyson. He also defeated George Foreman, Charlton. He fought everybody along the way. He didn't duck anybody. Evander Holyfield was a great boxer, Charlton.
Yep.
And, here was a guy during that time when we saw him grow up from this small body person to this huge heavyweight, Charlton.
Yeah.
In that steroid era. But he still was a dominant force in the ring.
Yeah, a dominant force in the ring. And just like anything else, you got to fight. I remember when we started Big C Sports, there were some people who were being hateful and just downright mean. And they happen to be a different skin color, but it can happen in all colors. But because we didn't listen, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can also follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. If you have a television set in your home and you have Xfinity Comcast television, you can follow Big C Sports. What I really love is the app by Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C, and he'll do his thing. We're not trying to please everybody. We just want to tell you things that you can Google. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
You know, Charlton, we're getting close to football season, and one of these other milestones once again. This will be the 150 year of college football. We're talking about celebrating the 100th year anniversary of the NFL. We're talking about celebrating the 150th anniversary of the opening kickoff of the 2019 college football season.
Well, I know that I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to it. There's a lot of great things happening in the world of sports, and I know sometimes it can close our mind off to what's going on outside of sports, but we just say keep an open mind. And also, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you, on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.